This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring a discussion on Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Yojana, various aspects of the scheme. The participants are Sharad Kohli, economic analyst, and Sonu Sood, anchor.
In March 2020, when the unprecedented pandemic situation led to a national lockdown, the government introduced a bouquet of relief measures for the poor and vulnerable under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana to help them tide over the unforeseen crisis. To discuss the various aspects of this important milestone in India's march towards becoming a developed country by 2047, we have with us senior economic analyst Shri Sharad Kohli. Sharadji, a warm welcome to you on Akashvani.
Thank you so much, and my greetings to all the Akashvani listeners.
Sharadji, in the Amrit Kal, where we are aiming to become a developed nation, what is the significance of government's flagship welfare scheme, PM Garib Kalyan Yojana, in ensuring inclusivity along with development?
Well, Sonu, there are two dimensions to this whole Garib Kalyan package. One, of course, was as an emergency measure, where what happened in 2020, I think it can never be obliterated from our memories. World over, we saw crisis, an unprecedented kind of a situation where the entire world was locked down. And, the lockdown, the impact of lockdown, other than it was obviously done to prevent health loss and prevent loss of lives. But then it had an economic fallout. We all know that factories closed down, the government machinery, part of government machinery had to close down, construction activity closed down, trading closed down, markets closed down, the whole townships closed down, the whole states had to close down, movement of traffic was barred, and so on and so forth. I mean, I'm sure people have not deleted this from their memories, and it was unprecedented. I don't think anybody in his or her lifetime had seen or imagined anything like this, which happened in March 2020 and onwards for about a year or so. So I think there are two dimensions, as I said. One dimension was to take it as an emergency measure. So at that time, it was an emergency measure. And to name a few things which were taken as emergency measure, if I quote some examples, like the most vulnerable to the health crisis at that time were the health workers, the people who were involved in hospitals, the people who were busy treating patients, they were involved in supplying oxygen, supplying medicine, nursing, doctors. And we know dozens and dozens of them, unfortunately, they lost their lives because they were in direct touch with the patients. Apart from the patients losing life, these people also lost life because they were in the service of the people who were suffering. So I think a health insurance scheme of 50 lakhs was introduced at that time for the health workers, which government was cognizant of the fact that these people are in the service. And I treat them as martyrs because anybody who dies in the service of the nation, ultimately you were serving the nation. For me, I hold them in very, very high esteem. Then, of course, the 5 kilos of food grains and 1 kilo of pulses being given, and the scheme continues till now. I'm talking of this. So what was Garib Kalyan package at that time? And now this is called Garib Kalyan Yojana. Now, a lot of people contest this and they question that Corona is now over, thankfully. We are into 2023 now, the end of 2023. Corona is far over. So do we recognize that there are 80 crore people who are as poor that they will sleep empty stomach if this Garib Kalyan Yojana, food grain benefit is not given? My answer to them is no. No, that is not the case, because we don't have that many poor who really want government to supply them food grains. Otherwise, they're going to sleep empty. But the fact of the matter is that this help being given, 5 kilos of food grains being given to people, is an additional support for people. Today, take, for example, a family who's now able to meet both its ends. They're all earning well, but they're still getting this benefit. I think this is an additional help to them. If the government is making a small and humble contribution to those people, that look, even when you got back your job, even when your small little business is back in action, even when you found your work, we will continue to help you, because let this be a small help from the government side. This would help you in supplementing your food. And, maybe the food grains we are provided are of a different quality. You may not be buying the same quality. So therefore, this becomes an additional help to those people. Well, going back to 2020, if I refer to some more packages, Sonu, 20 crore women beneficiaries of Jan Dhan. We all know that the Jan Dhan count is beyond 50 crores, and 20 crore women were highlighted, where 500 rupees per month for 3 months at that time was deposited in their account, and a very substantial amount of 30,952 crores was allocated for this purpose. It was a big help because these were the women, they were not working themselves, their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, they were working, they had lost their jobs. So the women knows how to, only a woman knows how to run a household. She knows she needs money, and she may not be getting money in hand because her family earning member may have lost the job or lost the work that he was doing, or that woman was working somewhere. She had also lost a job because the most vulnerable part of the society were women and younger employed lot, because they were taken out first at that time. So this 500 rupees came as a big relief to them. And then, of course, 13.62 families at that time who were beneficiaries of Manrega, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. We're talking of that scheme. Their daily wage amount was enhanced from 180 to 202 rupees, anticipating that probably now, I think the number of beneficiaries have increased, and, maybe the second family member who was earning there may not be having the job anymore. So I think they were given this additional amount to make sure that the shortfall is covered to a certain extent. Then there were three categories, I remember, Sonu, three categories of society which were highlighted. One was the poor senior citizens, because senior citizens, again, the most vulnerable part of the society, because they were surviving on pensions or some pocket money being given by their sons and daughters or whatever, who had lost their jobs. So I think their family members who were supporting them were not in a position to give them money. So I think government came forward and 3 crore poor senior citizens. Then the second category of the society which was highlighted were the poor widows, because these widows who were supported by their distant relatives or their children, they had lost the jobs. So this was the second sector which was highlighted. And third and the last sector, and a very vulnerable one, were the poor, specially abled people, because these people, the flow of income to these people, whatever little flow that they had, that was also lost. So around 3 crore of these three category people were highlighted, and 2,814 crores, I remember, was allocated to this particular category because these were the most vulnerable.
You feel that apart from the financial support, which was very much required at that time, this was also, you can say, emotional support which the people got. It must have given them a lot of moral courage to deal with the situation.
Oh, yes, undoubtedly. I mean, if you know that your government, people who govern you, they are with you. Obviously it becomes very, very reassuring, because that the government is standing, government is giving us cash, whatever cash that was being given to the most vulnerable part. Government was giving food grains, government was giving insurance, government was giving extra wages under the Manrega. Obviously, to any family, it sounds very reassuring. And not to forget the other things which the government had been doing, whether, right from building houses to building toilets to bringing water to their house, bringing electricity to their house. These are the people, where the women used to go and, in the open. And today, they have their own toilets. So I think when the government includes you in the growth process, it's very reassuring. And this is the second dimension, which Sonu, I wanted to mention here, that the second dimension of this whole thing. So one dimension was as an emergency measure at that time, because suddenly, everything had gone topsy-turvy and the economy was in crisis. And these were the people who were suffering the most. So this was an emergency measure, the whole package. But the second intention, and today, as we look back, more than 3.5 years ago, what happened? I think our dream of Amrit Kal and our dream of becoming a developed economy in 2047, and I must mention here, and very, very comprehensively, that a nation can only become developed, a nation can only be termed as developed when there is inclusive growth. You cannot develop with a handful of people. And this is exactly where these policies came from. So when we say Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas. What we mean is Sabka Saath, we are trying to include the last man in the queue. Let nobody be left behind as far as the development process is concerned. And in a crisis like COVID, if there is a bunch of people in the country who have suffered massively, they would have never able to bring back themselves into the mainstream of the economy. They would have permanently been scarred by that happening which took place at that time. So I think these packages, they may sound, somebody can come and contest that, a woman getting 500 rupees for 3 months, 1,500, what help will it provide? I would say that these small contributions from the government, and they continued for a longer time, like Garib Kalyan Yojana continues even today. I think the small help from the government may be small, may look small, but look at the numbers we are looking at. We are looking at a total population of 1.42 billion people in this country. So small contribution, as you rightly said, it becomes an emotional support, it becomes a moral support, and it also makes a citizen feel that we are the part of mainstream development. We have not been left behind. It is not that people in the larger cities who are growing, it is not that people who live in big cities, they are becoming rich. We are at least part of the development. I think that is very, very reassuring, Sonu, for any citizen of the country.
Right. One more aspect, recently there has been this study that multidimensional poverty has come down in India. You feel that these ongoing efforts of the government, they identify areas like now for tribal welfare, there are concerted schemes and aspirational district scheme is there. We have this Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra happening for 2 months where the government machinery is going to the smallest of villages to spread awareness about the various government welfare schemes. You feel all these multi-dimensional efforts of the government will lead to decline in multi-dimensional poverty further?
That has already happened. If you see, that has already happened. A recent report which came a few weeks ago, it said that 13.5 crore people have moved out from the poverty index. And which poverty index is that? See, so far, we construed poverty index as somebody who doesn't have a bank balance, somebody who doesn't have a saving, somebody who doesn't have money in his pocket, doesn't have cash in. I think that is the simplest, easiest, and I would say the most ignorant definition of poverty. But here comes a comprehensive poverty index. This is called multidimensional. When I say multidimensional, I mean whether a person has nutritional facilities, A. B, whether a person has medical facilities, whether he's got access to medical facilities. C, whether a person has electricity in his house, whether a person has water in his house, whether a person has a chhat over his head, whether a person is living in a house, is it a constructed house, whether a person has access to education, whether a person has access to sanitation. I think these are the things which combined together define what poverty is. So I think when we say 13.5 crore people have been lifted out of multidimensional poverty index, MPI as we call it, I think this is a new way of learning and a more comprehensive way of learning how poverty gets removed. Simply putting in somebody's bank account, I may put 50,000 rupees in a poor man's bank account. Here's a very classic example. The person will burn it away in probably, let's say, 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, even 6 months for that matter. And then after that, he's back to normal, he's back to square one. But if I train a person, if I provide him medical support, if I provide him sanitation, if I provide him nutrition, if I provide him education, I am trying to create a future for that person. I'm trying to make that person feel that, look, I may not be having enough money in my bank or my pocket, but at least I am getting all the facilities which a rich man has in a bigger city and so on and so forth. So I think multidimensional poverty index is something which has worked magic for this country. And to say 13.5 crore people, and it is the way people perceive. If somebody wants to think that I am only out of poverty when I have 4 paisa in my bank account, where that is the way it's perceived, although the person may be availing all the facilities, which I just listed, then I would not call that person poor in the traditional way we used to call it. So this is the new way of looking at poverty, and the government has, and it is all a result of so many schemes, welfare schemes, which you just listed out, and the measures taken in Garib Kalyan package, which has resulted in people coming out of this multidimensional poverty index. As I said, I'm very convinced that for Amrit Kal, I would like to reiterate that if we have to dream of being a developed nation, 2047 or maybe sooner, I think we will have to make sure that every section of the society, we should not forget that still about 60% of our population lives in rural areas, and some of the rural areas are very prosperous, but I would say most of the rural areas may not be as prosperous as probably Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Kolkata may not be as or probably some of the tier 2, tier 3 cities. But if this growth, these welfare schemes, this whole Vikas Yatra, I would say, the journey of development, if this reaches the rural part of the country, if this reaches the most left behind part of the country, I think our dream of becoming a developed nation will be realized much sooner than 47. And that is where these schemes are aimed at. And the government has been, whether it is Kisan, Samman, we saw agriculture running into losses, then government immediately came forward, 2,000 rupees every 4 months, 6,000 rupees per annum directly being punched across digitally into the bank account of the beneficiaries. I think this is magic working. And I think I spoke to some of the farmers, Sonu, and those farmers told me, I said, what do you do with 6,000 rupees? He said, sir, hum kuch karte hain ya nahi karte hain. But this has helped us so much. हम इनसे खाद खरीद लेते हैं, हम इनसे बीज खरीद लेते हैं. It has simply worked magic for them. Although the amount overall may appear to be very small. But let's not forget that this shows the gesture of the government. This shows sensitivity of the government. This shows that the government wants to include you in the growth. You cannot be left behind. If we cannot become a developed nation if you are left behind, I think that is what matters for me, Sonu.
Thank you so much, Sharadji, for this invigorating, motivating discussion about how our country is moving very, very firmly on the path of progress.
Thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Yojana, various aspects of the scheme. The participants were Sharad Kohli, economic analyst, and Sonu Sood, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsttalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.